Okay, for this question, here, let me start the question. Convert 2.5 grams into milligrams. I'm going to go into a little bit of background first into just some of the prefixes that can go before our units. So we have a table here to the left, and I will say in no way are you meant to memorize this entire table, but you should be familiar already with a couple of these units. And if you're not, you're going to want to be familiar with, well, the base units, which we know are just one, right? So if I have grams or meters or pounds, I'm just talking about 1 pound or 1 gram or one whatever it is. If I instead talked about, let's talk about meters, and this will sound very familiar to you. If I instead of talking about meters, I talked about centimeters, and I was trying to convert in between meters and centimeters, I know that I have, and we'll look at this far right column to start, 0.01 meters. So in other words, 1 centimeter equals 0.01 meters. Okay. And hopefully this is not the first time you've seen it. If it is, you might want to spend some time kind of familiarizing yourself with this. And these practice problems are going to be even more important. Another common one is kilo, okay, as in kilometer, right? And if I look at this here, if I have 1 kilometer, that means I actually have 1,000 meters. Okay. The other way of looking at this is looking at it in the, well, let me actually just leave this up, is looking at it in the far, or in 2 columns to the left here, this column right here, and you'll see that I have 10 and then to some power of something. So in the case of kilometers, I have 10 to the power of 3. And what that's saying is, 1 kilometer, oops, I don't really need to rewrite that, is equal to 10 to the power of 3 meters. And if you actually put 10 to the power of 3, or we can actually do this in our head because it's 10, we know it's just 10 times 10 times 10, which if you multiply out is 1,000, right? Pretty easy to multiply by powers of 10, right? We just add, 10 times the first 10, we added 0, times the next 10, we added 0, so we get 1,000, right? That's what you do when you're multiplying by 10s. You just add zeros. And let's come down here to the centi case, and it's to the -2. This is a little trickier, right? It's still saying 1 centimeter is 10 to the -2 meters. When we have an exponent that's a negative, what it's saying is, it's saying divide by 10 this many times, or divide by the base this many times. So in this case, we have 1 divided by 10 divided by 10, right? So we're dividing by 10 twice instead of, multiplying by 10 3 times. Right? I could have written 1 times 10 times 10 times 10, right? All the same. I just didn't include that 1 the first time. Okay, so when we 1 divide by 10, well, again, dividing by 10 is very easy. All we're doing is moving the decimal place 1 to the left to get 0.1 for that first 10. And then we move it to the left again to get 0.01. So we come back to our answer. Okay, so centi and kilo, those are probably, and even milli, right, which is 10 to the -3. These are probably going to be our most used units, but that's not to say we can't use, these other units. When we get to waves, we're going to talk a lot. We're going to be in the nano and micro spectrum, because we'll be talking about very, very small things. We'll be talking about light waves. So, for now, these are kind of the 3 that we'll mainly be using, but we will actually use other units off this table as well. Again, we don't need to memorize them, but we should be, just a little bit familiar. So let's go ahead and do this conversion problem. And we're trying to convert 2.5 grams, and we want to end up in milligrams. So from our table, we need to know how to get grams to milligrams. So we're in our base unit, so we're at 1, and we need to get to milligrams, which is 0.01. And let me actually write it down here so I have a little bit more space. So 2.5 grams. We're trying to end up in milligrams. And we know, like I said, 0.01 milligrams. Maybe I'll write this up here. 0.001 milligrams is the same as 1 gram. Okay, so this is our link between grams and milligrams. This is our conversion factor. And the way we want to use these conversion factors is we want to look at this kind of like so. We have 2.5 grams. We need to end up with milligrams, and we need to multiply by something in order to get rid of the grams and end up with milligrams. So if we think of it in this way, we need to, have a gram down here, right? So in that way, these G's will cancel out. And we need to have an mg, a milligram, up here. That way we'll be left with a milligram. Now there's actually a way to do this, right? We can only multiply by 1, otherwise we're changing the number, right? But because we have this equality here, that 0.001 milligrams equals 1 gram, if I do this, if I divide by 1 gram on each side, right, that's valid. We get 0.001 milligrams. And instead of doing any kind of simplification, I'm just going to leave it like that. And on this side, the grams will cancel out, and the ones will, but we'll be left with 1. So it's perfectly okay to multiply or divide by this number because it is actually, in fact, 1. So if then I write it here, this 2.5 grams is being multiplied by 1. I'm just using a special form of 1 to end up in milligrams. And what I can see is, well, if I'm multiplying by 0.001, right, I could put that into my calculator, or, and this is kind of where this form of it kind of ends up being really nice, instead of writing 0.001, I could have written 10 to the negative 3, which tells me, oh, hey, just divide by 10 3 times, which I know means, in my head, it means, hey, just move the decimal over 3 times. So 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so I've done this, with a bit messy, but I'm not going to have enough space. 0.0025 milligrams is our answer. What I wanted you to see here is this kind of setup where I have put where I'm at grams, and I need to get to milligrams. And so that kind of dictates what I'm going to be multiplying by, my conversion factor. This here was my conversion factor. I was able to do it in one step, but you might not always be able to do it in one step, right? So that's why, it's nice to kind of have this chart here. And yeah,